So, as you guys probably guess, you can also have a dominant triad, which is a chord based off of so. And so, in tonal Western art music, we have a very important relationship between these two chords, and this causes you to recognize what do is. So you're probably familiar with something sounding like this. And that is a dominant tonic chord progression. One of the special things about dominant chords is that you can actually add another note on top just by skipping another scale degree and adding another one, so that it sounds like this. And that just makes the dominant tonic chord progression sound even stronger. Okay, so this is a continuity error, I know. It's my second day of filming. Moving on. So, about dominant tonic progressions. The thing about them is, theoretically, you can use any note in the scale and just have these two chords. However, that would actually be a really boring song, don't you think, having only two chords? Unless you're looking for some kind of Disney rock smash hit, but I don't think most people are. So what composers do throughout the century is take this idea of dominant tonic and try to make that take as long as possible to get to that ending cadence, because when you hear it, it sounds like the end of a song. So the first thing that composers came up with is a chord that leads to the dominant called a predominant. So there are three ways that a predominant generally occurs. One of them is actually just making a dominant for the dominant. This is called a secondary dominant. It's like mixing red and yellow to make orange makes a secondary color. So if you had a tonic dominant of the dominant, dominant tonic progression, it would sound like this. But there's another way that you can make this sound like a weaker dominant of the dominant and still be within the major scale. And so what you get is a minor chord based on scale degree 2 or re. That one sounds like this. It's a weaker chord that leads to the dominant so that it doesn't actually sound like you've left the home key. Another kind of predominant is actually utilizing the tonic as the dominant of the predominant. If you couldn't tell, basically all of these chords are working as dominants of something. So when you interpret the tonic chord as a dominant, you'll get the chord based on scale degree 4 or fa. Now you may have noticed that this sounds very similar to this. This is another reason why both of these chords function as predominants, because they actually have two notes in common. So anyway, a chord progression with scale degree 4 as the predominant sounds like this. Now we have 4 chords in our progression, and these chords, tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic, actually make up what we like to call the phrase model. The phrase model is just a structure that we use to create phrases that sound coherent, and so this is actually going to be almost every phrase you hear in music is going to be based around this idea of tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic. So, you may be wondering, how do you know when a phrase starts or ends? A phrase will almost always start on tonic and end on tonic. The way that a phrase ends also has a special name called a cadence, and there are several different kinds of cadence. Some of them we've already discussed. There are authentic cadences, which is dominant to tonic, which is the one that we already learned about. It'll sound like this. Or there is also what's called a half cadence, where it ends on 5. So instead of getting the tonic at the end of the phrase, you get the dominant at the end of the phrase. That kind of phrase would sound like this. So what happens with this phrase is that you guys probably can hear that it needs to be answered by something. This is what a lot of school teachers will call a musical question. So what composers did is to take this idea of an incomplete phrase and to complete it with another phrase. So now you already have two phrases together, making the dominant tonic progression take even longer. Listen to this. obviously that is a very simple piece, but it gets the idea of two phrases working together to make a bigger picture. You guys may have noticed that there was one more kind of chord I added in there that sounds like this. This is called a cadential 6/4. And I'm not going to get into much written theory, but the reason why it's called a cadential 6/4 is because 6/4 is the label that we use for a chord in second inversion, which means that the top note, when it's in root position, is actually now in the bass. I understand that that might have been really confusing to you guys, but it just sounds like this. And so what you want to hear is a resolution to the dominant, and then a resolution to tonic. It's just another way of making dominants take even longer to get to the tonic. Okay, so just to review everything we've gone over for today, we have the major scale, the minor scale, and we have triads, and we also learned about the phrase model. Which in minor sounds like this. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. A lot of this stuff you may actually learn better once we get to it in context. Next time we're going to be starting on some really simple music that becomes the basis for all of the stuff that we're going to learn about later. So hopefully soon we'll get to real music that you guys want to know about. As always, if there are any pieces that you want to learn, please put them down in the comments. And like I said, if you have any questions, I know I was throwing a lot of information at you, just please leave questions in the comments, and I will do my best to get back to them in the comments or next video or in the describey. So, I will see you guys next time on WAMFTAL.